So, you know those faces you've seen 100 times on screen, but you don't really know their names? Today, we're talking about one of those people, Bruce Greenwood. You've seen him, I promise you have. You just didn't know his story. This is the untold story of the man Hollywood quietly leans on when it needs class, intensity, and a little bit of mystery. Bruce was born on August 12, 1956, in a place that doesn't exactly scream Hollywood. Rouyn Noranda, Quebec. Mining town. Remote. Cold winters. A long way from red carpets and movie premieres. His dad, Hugh, was a geophysicist and worked in academic and research circles. His mom, Mary Sylvia, was a nurse who later became a social worker. So, right from the start, Bruce is caught between two worlds, science and structure on one side, emotion and empathy on the other. As a kid, he didn't grow up rooted in just one place. His family moved around, from Quebec to Princeton, New Jersey, to Bethesda, Maryland. That kind of childhood does something interesting to you. You're always the new kid. You're always figuring out who you have to be in every new classroom, every new street, every new accent. Later, people would talk about how Bruce could just slip into any role, but that started way before acting. It started in school hallways. When he was a teenager, his family eventually moved back to Canada. They landed in Vancouver, British Columbia. That city would quietly shape his future. Before acting, though, Bruce had another dream. He wanted to be an Olympic skier. Not kind of a skier, not weekend hobby skier. Serious. He trained hard. Pushed himself. The mountain was his stage. But life has a brutal way of editing your dreams. He injured his knee badly. The kind of injury that doesn't care how much you love something. Just like that, the Olympic idea was over. Imagine being a teenager, feeling like your whole identity is wrapped up in this one physical ability, and suddenly it's gone. Most people don't know that about him. They just see the calm, controlled man on screen. But behind that, there's a kid who had to start over. With skiing off the table, Bruce went searching. He worked in a chemical factory, he did carpentry, he wandered through Europe. He was not racing towards stardom. He was just trying to figure out who he was if he wasn't an athlete anymore. At some point, he started taking acting more seriously. He studied at the University of British Columbia. He got involved with the Vancouver theater scene. No one was looking at Bruce Greenwood and saying, "You're going to be the President of the United States on screen one day." He was just another young actor who didn't know if this would actually work out. But here's the thing about people who've already had one dream ripped away from them. They don't treat the second one lightly. Bruce didn't explode onto the scene. There was no overnight success, no sudden breakout viral moment. Instead, he did what almost every working actor has to do. He started small. In the late 1970s and early 80s, you see his name start to pop up on TV. Guest roles, little appearances. You might have caught him in things like The Hitchhiker, Saint Elsewhere, early credits that came and went for most viewers. But every time, he showed up and did the job. He worked through the 80s, a familiar pattern for a Canadian actor trying to make it. A little bit of film, a lot of television, science fiction, cop shows, dramas. He was building something, brick by brick, with no guarantee that the house would ever actually be finished. The first time a lot of people really started to notice him was in a television series called Saint Elsewhere, medical drama. He had a recurring role. It wasn't a superstar part, but it was steady, reliable, and that word kept following him. Reliable, dependable, solid. Those words don't get you magazine covers, but they get you phone calls from directors. In 1989, he got a lead role in a TV series called Hardball. That same year, he did a film called Another Chance. Not massive hits, not cultural explosions, but he was now a face people in the industry recognized. In the 90s, that quiet recognition grew. He took roles in projects like Knots Landing, Road to Avonlea, and a movie that would become a cult favorite, Exotica, directed by Adam McGoyan. In Exotica, you could see something different, a carefully controlled intensity. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but you couldn't stop watching him. There's a line people say in Hollywood, you either chase fame or you chase the work. Bruce Greenwood chased the work, and the work came. Then came a movie that shifted his trajectory, 1996, a film called The Sweet Hereafter, again directed by Adam Egoyan. A haunting story about a small town reeling from a tragic school bus accident. Bruce played a grieving father. If you've ever seen it, you remember the silence more than the words. The way his face looked like it was holding in a tidal wave. That role earned the film international acclaim. It went to Cannes, it was nominated for Oscars, and suddenly, the guy who was solid and dependable became powerful and essential. People started asking, who is Bruce Greenwood? The answer was, a man in his 40s who had been grinding for 2 decades. A man who had lost his first dream on a mountain and built a second one in dark theaters and bright sets. From there, you start to see him in bigger and bigger projects. He shows up in Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd and Tommy Lee Jones. He plays the husband you're not sure you can trust. There's charm. There's danger. You lean in. Then he becomes a kind of specialist. The man you cast when you need authority and humanity in the same frame. In 2000, he plays President John F. Kennedy in the movie 13 Days. Think about the pressure of that, playing one of the most analyzed, imitated, and mythologized figures in American history. The accent, the posture, the weight of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bruce didn't do an impression. He did an interpretation. Grounded, measured, human. For many people in the business, that was the moment he stopped being, oh, that guy, and became Bruce Greenwood. The 90s ended with him as a respected actor. The 2000s solidified it. He showed up in I, Robot, in Passenger, in Capote, in Being Julia. And then, in 2009, something happened that would introduce him to an entirely new generation. Star Trek. J.J. Abrams rebooted the franchise. Chris Pine was the young Captain Kirk. Zachary Quinto was Spock. And Bruce Greenwood? He was Captain Christopher Pike, the mentor, the man who sees something in Kirk before Kirk sees it in himself. When Bruce walks onto the screen as Pike, there's this immediate feeling of trust. You believe this guy has seen things. You believe he has made impossible decisions in deep space. And there's this unshowy, quiet strength in how he plays him. He returned to that role in Star Trek Into Darkness. At this point, Bruce Greenwood had become part of pop culture history. But the funny thing is, he still wasn't a household name. You might know his face, you might say, oh, I love that guy, what's his name again? That's the paradox of Bruce Greenwood. He's famous by recognition, not by headlines. As his career rolled on, he kept choosing fascinating roles. In television, he appeared in shows like Mad Men. In American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, he played Gil Garcetti, the Los Angeles County District Attorney. Again, that mix of power and pressure. Then, in the age of streaming, he did something a lot of younger viewers know him for, Gerald's Game, a Netflix film based on a Stephen King story. On paper, it's a horror movie, but underneath, it's a psychological, emotional nightmare. Bruce plays the husband, Gerald. Without spoiling too much, his character is crucial to the main character's trauma, memory, and internal struggle. Even when he's not physically present on screen, his presence is haunting the movie. It's a perfect example of what he's so good at. Making characters feel larger than the scenes they're in, being a kind of emotional gravity. He worked again in Stephen King territory with Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, and he continued showing up in projects where his name was almost a secret weapon. If you see Bruce Greenwood in the cast list, you know the emotional stakes are about to go up. Beyond his roles, there's another side of him most people don't see, the private side. Bruce Greenwood has been married to his wife, Susan Devlin, since the 1970s, long before the steady work, long before the red carpets. They met when he was young. They built a life through the years that most people never see. If Hollywood is a town of short marriages and sudden divorces, Bruce and Susan are the quiet exception, decades together. That stability, that loyalty, that long partnership, it feels connected to the way he acts. There's a groundedness in him, a sense that he knows who he is when the cameras stop. He's also a musician. He plays guitar. He spent years playing and singing, sometimes for roles, sometimes simply for the joy of it. He's not the kind of actor who floods social media with his private life. He doesn't chase controversy. He doesn't scream for attention. He lets the work talk for him. In an industry obsessed with youth and overnight fame, Bruce's story is almost radical. He became widely recognized in middle age. He didn't burn bright and disappear. He slow burned. He built a career that has lasted decades. Think about how many different kinds of authority figures he's played. Presidents, admirals, doctors, CEOs, fathers, captains. It's as if Hollywood said, when we need someone the audience will trust, or quietly fear, we call Bruce. But under that, there's always a hint of the younger man, the kid who wanted to fly down a mountain at Olympic speed, the teenager who had to pivot when the universe said no, the young actor in Vancouver, wondering if anyone would ever remember his name. The untold story of Bruce Greenwood isn't about scandal. It's not about meltdowns, feuds, or tabloid disasters. It's about resilience. It's about reinvention. It's about building a life in the shadows of the spotlight. When people talk about actors, they love the legends who dominate every headline. But here's a different kind of legend. The one whose face you recognize in a split second, even if you can't quite grab the name. The one whose performances sneak up on you, who makes the movie feel just a little more real just by walking into frame. Bruce once described acting as a way of exploring different parts of himself through other people, and that feels right. From small-town Quebec to New Jersey to Maryland to Vancouver, from a broken knee on a ski slope to some of the biggest sets in Hollywood. From a guest spot on a TV show you barely remember, to Captain Pike in Star Trek, to President Kennedy in 13 Days, to terrifying husband in Gerald's Game, to lawyers, doctors, detectives, and fathers across 100 different universes. His story is not loud, it's not flashy, but it's quietly incredible. So next time you're watching a movie and you see a man walk onto the screen with that calm, intelligent, slightly mysterious energy, the kind of man who looks like he's carrying 10 different secrets and 30 years of experience behind his eyes, you might lean forward and ask, wait, is that? Yeah, it is. That's Bruce Greenwood, the Olympic dream that never happened, the actor who took the long road, the quiet pillar behind some of your favorite stories. Now you know his name. And now, when you see his face, you'll know there's a whole life behind that look, a life that almost went a completely different way and somehow ended up exactly where it was supposed to be.